Infrastructure Committee. This is a meeting of the Council which is being held remotely and is being recorded and streamed via the YouTube channel where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. Please note that any comments posted in the chat feed of the Council's YouTube page during the recording of the meeting will not be monitored by the Council. The recording will be available on the Council's website following the meeting. All members have been provided with a remote committee guidance note prior to the meeting. Please can these be adhered to during the meeting? And points include all mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so the meeting is not interrupted by ringtone. Please switch your profile to mute unless you are speaking. And if you wish to speak, please raise your hand in order so that I'm aware that you wish to speak. For each item, officers will present the report and committee will then discuss it, after which, if there are any group leader or deputy group leaders present, they will be asked if they have any comments to make before we vote on each item. Thank you. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence.
No, Chairman, we don't have any apologies.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. See no declarations of interest. Agenda item number 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments that anyone wishes to make on the minutes of the previous meeting before we go to the vote? See no comment. Councillor Turner.
This one small error, and that's in the voting record. The column 2, I think it is, where you've got me abstaining. So, yeah, the record reads Richard Moore against, Craig Rimmer against, and Phil Turner abstained. I actually voted against.
Thank you. That was on the work programme item.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I will, subject to your approval, I'll take that back with officers following this evening's meeting just to confirm with the recording of the meeting.
Yeah, I've checked the recording. It does say, you can clearly hear me say against, but it's just a small error. Nothing too major.
Thank you. Councillor Root.
Councillor Turner was too polite to say that was because I abstained.
Thank you. Apologies, members, we will get that corrected, subject to your approval of the minutes this evening. So we'll now proceed to the vote. I will vote in favour of the minutes. Councillor Reid.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
In favour.
Councillor Fellows.
In favour.
Councillor Turner.
Be voting for.
Councillor Rimmer.
For.
Thank you. We now proceed on to agenda item number 4, the work programme update, which is on pages 9 to 11 of your agenda. Just a couple of points from me on the work programme that, as members can see, there are a lot of items that are coming forward with dates to be confirmed. There are 2 items that I think we need to proceed with quickly. One is the update on consultation and adoption of the LC whip, including report on sustainable transport, and the 5-year housing land supply. And I'd like to bring those 2 items forward to the next committee meeting of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Is there any other comments that anybody would like to make? Mrs. Lawrence, would you like to come in on that point first before I bring in Councillor Brown?
Just a quick one. On the local cycling walking infrastructure plan, that is now up for consultation, and on the council's web Facebook page, you can find the link for that consultation. So can you please get as many people to respond to that consultation as possible, because the more responses we get, it shows the borough has got interest in cycling and walking, and we're more likely to get funding. So it is a bit of there's a bit of issue there with, we need to make sure people respond. So that's my plea during using Spy to plea to people to use that as a way in. It takes, I've done it for Chelmsford, and it takes about 5 minutes. It's quite quick. So could you pass that around?
Just to echo that point, we've previously had a report of this committee on local cycling walking improvement plans passed unanimously at this committee, and I think it's something that we're all wanting to encourage around sustainable transport, and we do need to listen to as many voices from residents as possible in plans as they progress. So strongly second that comment, and we'll do all we can to encourage completion of the consultation. Councillor Rimmer.
Yes, well, actually, I wasn't going to comment on that bit, but I echo that. I think that's highly important that we do get as many people to respond to that as possible. and encourage more cycling in our borough and see if we can get more funding for cycling in our borough. In terms of the work programme, I don't know where the letter to Essex County Council from yourself, Chair, which was mandated by the motion to full council in October, where that's got to, because there was an update in the December council agenda pack, which said that it was due to be drafted. It hadn't been drafted yet, and we hadn't received any further updates. And this is on the Pitsea incinerator, because there was that letter that you were going to send. And I don't know if that's something that should be on our work programme.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. I'll bring Mrs. Lyons in shortly just on the council's response, but the Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee did consider the response on the Pitsea incinerator as part of their work programme that went through a committee meeting last week. Mrs. Lyons, anything further you'd like to add?
Yes, Councillor Rimmer, strangely that comes under the, even though it's a local planning authority waste issue, the waste issues are covered by the Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee. So the consultation letter went to the Neighbourhood and Public Spaces Committee for agreement, and then it's been sent out. So it's one of those things that sort of sits in two sort of different places. So that went out. We can send you a copy of that if you would like, and we can make sure that goes out.
Councillor Rimmer?
No, yeah, thank you. I think there's a misunderstanding. It's not about a consultation response. It was actually what the motion, which was moved at council, which I tried to amend, but was voted down in October, that actually mandated the chair of this committee to write a letter to Essex County Council asking for their planning department to have a meeting in Pitsea, for their planning department to do a tour of the site, and for some other measures as well. And when there was a December update on this, it was actually in the December update to council, in the full council pack, it basically said the letter was due to be drafted, but we haven't had any updates since. So because it was put to this committee and delegated to the chair of the committee to do this, I was just wondering where we're at with it and if we could have an update on that, please.
Absolutely, Councillor Rimmer. The report went, as we said in previous response, the report went to Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces. We haven't yet had a committee date from Essex County Council in relation to that, but we will strongly, as we have always been calling for, and that was referred to at the Staffing Matters Subcommittee meeting in middle of last year, wanting to have that meeting held within Pitsea. The invitation will be sent to the Development Committee of Essex County Council for that to be held here. Mrs. Lyons.
And also that point, Councillor, was raised at Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces as well with regard to a site visit. And that was made very clear by Councillor Harrison, the chair of that committee, that they wanted a site visit to allow our members and members of the relevant committee at the county to view the impact of that development on our borough.
So that is being undertaken across both committees, Councillor Rimmer. Yep, Councillor Rimmer.
I'm sorry. Just to dwell on this point, I need to maybe it's a yes or no question on this then. So has a letter actually been written by yourself, Chairman, as mandated by that motion to full council?
A letter has been sent from this council relating to the items that were referred to within that motion. And as soon as we have a date set for the committee meeting to take place, we'll be inviting them for that to happen within Basildon.
Sorry, Chair.
Councillor
Is
Rimmer,
that
I'm not
from
going
yourself?
Pardon? That will be sent by myself.
And it has been sent, or it hasn't been sent?
We haven't received a date for the meeting yet, so I can't ask for the date to be. I can't refer to a date for the meeting to be held within Basildon because we haven't received that yet. But as soon as we are aware of the date, we will be inviting for that to be held within Basildon, and I can assure you that will come from me.
The application was massively delayed, Councillor Rimmer. It was received by the County Council before Christmas, and they didn't actually validate it until about a month ago. So it's actually been hanging around for a long time. And we only got the consultation, had to be sent back Friday last week. So it's not when it was received by the county, we didn't have notification because it wasn't valid until the beginning of just the middle of February.
Yeah, I guess the motion didn't say waiting for a consultation, we will do it. It was going to send it urgently. So I'm confused.
At that point, Councillor Rimmer, there wasn't an application that had been submitted. Mrs. Lyons, were you just about to make that same point?
Yeah, we didn't receive an application until the middle of February. It'd been submitted to the county, but we weren't allowed to view it until it was made public, and it was made public in the middle of February. And once we got the application, then the application's consultation response went via Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee. At that committee, it was raised that the committee, because that was where it should have gone. It was raised that we wanted a public meeting on site at that point, and now the consultation's ended. We can then deal with that point with the relevant committee at county.
Thank you. We'll now vote on the work programme. Sorry, Councillor Sutton.
Is there anything stopping us from getting some dates on the work programme? Only that there are some ones there. I mean, I asked for the clean air quality update. This is Councillor Callaghan's congestion charge versus clean air. It's an outright lie that it's a congestion charge. We know.
Councillor Turner, I am just going to stop you there. I don't want to stop your point. I don't want to stop you from speaking. We will not accuse another member of lying within this case. Okay,
well, it's a misunderstanding by somebody, but certainly the rhetoric being given out by Councillor Callaghan is not helping. And one way of clearing it up is bringing that report to committee. Now, I understand we're going into an election, and don't get me wrong, I'm up for election. I might not be back. I know you'd all be disappointed with that. I might not even. I can see you smiling. I know that I might not even be on this committee, let alone back in the council. But you know, these things are important. These things are important, not just to members, but to members of the public who we serve. And as I say, the rhetoric out there is about this congestion charge. It's got a lot of people confused, apart from us, because we know it is a clean air charge, which is completely different. But that one must be relatively easy to bring back to committee. Yeah, excuse me. There's a whole host of reports here that have TBC on them. I don't understand why.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. And in relation to some of the points there, I thought we were getting on so well there as well. And the report back on the proposed congestion charge and clean air charging zone was considered by the Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee on the 20th of January. So a full report was taken to Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces in relation to that item. The item that's on the work programme here, looking at more around the policy area, that is still to be confirmed on dates. And I'll hand over to Mrs. Lyons to just talk through some of the challenges we're experiencing.
So the council's got a corporate approach to climate change, which is really important, and we need to align everything we do to that. We are working on a piece of on some guidance, because Councillor Turner, we're in that horrible position which you well know from the local plan, where we've got emerging policies, we've got existing policies, and we've got the NPPF, and we've got everything else. And so we're working on an almost like an interim document at the moment that will have limited weight in the sort of the developer guidance approach, because we can't adopt anything until we've adopted the plan. So that is being worked on at the moment alongside Paul Brace's team, and so that's where we are with it. We can't take anything forward as a terms of a formal policy yet because of the state of the local plan. And I mean, Philip can probably update you where we are with the topic paper on air quality. We've got a topic paper on air quality and climate change, which has gone to the inspector, and that deals with some amendments to the policies in our plan to do with climate change.
Well, thanks for that, but that's not really the point I wanted to get at. And the point is, I mean, I understand that Neighbourhood and Public Spaces have done similar work, but we need some clarity around what exactly is that clean air quality. And And I hear what you're saying, but we're going to be in a limbo for an awful long time. So we can't be suggesting that we're just going to put all this business on hold. It's going to last for probably, what, a year, 2 years, 3 years. You know, the council has to move forward. And it seems a bit odd that, you know, we can't put some dates against here because we've got the local plan emerging. I think we need to just have a stab at some of this, and officers need to come clean with what they can deliver and what they can't. There's no point in having a work plan with TBCs on it. You know, if you want to kick it into the long grass, then just say it, and that's a political decision. I would accept that more than having an agenda with TBCs on there that nobody's ever going to get round to.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Mr. Slime, do you wish to respond to any of the points there?
I mean, Councillor Turner, the TBCs are the fact that we haven't got any dates for them. The air quality matters, we can't, and it's part of that. That's the problem. We've got committees that overlap each other. It sort of sits with the Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee because it's the air quality agenda comes under Paul Brace's team. What we have to look at in terms of air quality is in terms of the impact on the planning process and what policies are required for that. So some of the assessment on air quality will actually sit with Paul Brace's team. Paul Brace's service is not with us. So it would be an environmental health matter. What we would take from that, so once that policy is formally adopted, what we need to draw down from that is a guidance note, which we're working on, which will then deliver some changes for our developers to look at when they come forward with applications for planning permission. But the actual guidance on air quality actually sits with Neighbourhood and Public Spaces, not with this committee. And okay. I could argue it's difficult where we've got these environmental issues which go into planning, but actually the overarching policies is a corporate policy which sits not in this committee but in the Neighbourhood Public Spaces Committee.
Okay, look, guys, I don't want to argue this point. As I say, we've got an election. I might not even be here in May, so let's wait and see what happens. And it would be nice, though, Chair, to get some dates against some of these items, would it not?
Absolutely, Councillor Turner, and I reiterate the point that I made right at the start of the meeting, that the update on consultation and adoption of the LC Whip, including report on sustainable transport and the 5-year housing land supply position, needs to come forward at the next meeting of this committee. So those dates, the TBCs will change to dates for those two items in particular. And I will discuss the broader point that you've discussed with officers. Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, I didn't realise Councillor Turner was so worried about his seat. We might have run him in somewhere easy to win, like Northwest instead. The Conservative gain in May, I'm sure. In terms of the work programme, I'm just thinking about the environment again, but in terms of climate change. And is it something that this committee should actually be looking at in terms of our strategy for planning, to actually have an outlook for how we are transitioning to a carbon net zero economy in terms of planning, how that overall overarching element should be taken into account in terms of electrification of our cars, in terms of having carbon neutral electricity network, in terms of any heavy industry, in terms of those elements as well. So I just wondered if that's something that we could have a report on, especially as the next administration is going to be a lot more ambitious about getting carbon net zero before 2035 for Basildon.
The Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee last week passed the climate change policy, the first climate change policy that this council has ever passed, and following that will be a strategy. Mrs. Lyons, I presume that will involve cross-department working between teams, as we've outlined throughout the discussions on the work programme.
Yes, it has. And as I said before, Philip's team have put together a separate topic paper for the examination to sort of bring the inspector up to date with where we sit with our policies in our plan. So we have already looked at some of the climate change issues that aren't covered in our plan already. So that piece of work has been brought to expected attention, because our plan, because of the age of it, doesn't address some of the issues that we should be addressing as part of that process.
Thank you. We will now vote on the work programme. I will be voting.
I have my hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Moore, I couldn't see. If you could wave rather than use the hand up function.
Okay, you know, we have a different rule in the council. It gets all very confusing. You may recall that I asked a question at the last meeting about is the council going to respond to the government consultation on the right to regenerate. We have tonight the one on the well, I can't remember what it is now, but anyway, item 7 or whatever. But there's nothing on the right to regenerate. Now the consultation is closed. So did the council respond? And if so, what was the response?
Mrs. Lyons.
The response would have come from regeneration, not from planning, because obviously it was a consultation aimed at the regeneration rather than the planning. So I do not know, Councillor Moore, whether the response was actually sent. So it hasn't come to this committee. So I don't know about that one, Councillor Moore.
Okay, I don't understand how it goes to regeneration. This was about the public being able to purchase and designate land for planning that the council has not done anything with. So that's why I assumed it would come to the Strategic Planning Committee, not anything to do with regeneration.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. We will issue a response back to you following this meeting.
Okay, fine, thank you.
We will now vote onto the work programme, third time. We will vote on the work programme. I will be voting in favour. If I could ask members to unmute themselves. Councillor Fellows.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
In favour.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Turner.
Yes, against.
Councillor Rimmer.
Against.
And with my casting vote, the work programme has passed. We now proceed on to agenda item number 5, the neighbourhood planning update and criteria for spending neighbourhood planning budget allocation. Mr. Bilo, I believe you're presenting this report.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, members. The report is split into 2 sections. The first provides an update regarding the progress and status of each existing neighbourhood planning group within the borough, and the second section asks the committee to consider how the council will allocate additional funding from a pot of £50,000 to designated neighbourhood areas within the borough. This sum of money is in addition to grant funding from government. All 4 neighbourhood plans are at the draft plan preparation stage. Firstly, Hove Fields and Honolly. The Neighbourhood Forum neighbourhood area were designated back in May 2016. The entire neighbourhood area is located within the Greenbelt. The aspiration of the Neighbourhood Forum is to redevelop the neighbourhood area into a new standalone service community. However, a high level site evaluation undertaken in 2018 concluded that Hove Fields and Honolly neighbourhood area on its own presented limited opportunity for further residential development due to significant environmental infrastructure constraints. The area to the south of Wickford, including the Hove Fields and Honolly neighbourhood area, has however been identified as a broad location for potential housing growth in the next local plan review, as set out in policy SD2. The Hove Fields and Honolly Neighbourhood Forum has confirmed that they have suspended work on their neighbourhood plan pending the outcome of the local plan examination public, which they intend to make representations at. Moving on to the Bowes, Gifford and North Benfleet neighbourhood area. This area was approved in July 2016. There's a suite of evidence base for the local plan identifies the suitability and potential for growth within the Bowes, Gifford area, which could significantly contribute towards meeting the development needs of the borough. Policy SD3 of the plan sets out minimum housing target of 1,350 dwellings with supporting land uses and infrastructure to be delivered through this neighbourhood plan. This is of strategic importance in delivering the growth ambitions of the local plan. The next stages of the Bowes Gifford Neighbourhood Plan is the Regulation 14 pre-submission consultation, previously scheduled to take place late last year. The Parish Council has decided to defer holding this Regulation 14 consultation until this year, when the COVID issues have improved. So both the Council and the Parish Council have been working together to ensure that the neighbourhood plan can further evolve in a way that better enables it to meet the basic conditions test and then proceed towards submission and independent examination. The third neighbourhood plan is the Ramsden Bell House neighbourhood area. This area was designated in August 2018, and the Council soon after made a decision to set a housing target of 39 dwellings for the neighbourhood area. The neighbourhood area is currently in the process of preparing their neighbourhood plan. The group is working on an initial draft of the Regulation 14 plan, including an assessment of potential housing sites. Fourthly, the Noakbridge neighbourhood area was formed in November 2018. The local plan does not set a housing target for the area. However, strategic allocation H10 lies to the east of this neighbourhood area. The neighbourhood plan will be required to support the delivery of H10. The Parish Council is currently in the process of collecting evidence for the neighbourhood plan. Noakbridge Parish Council wish to contribute to and influence the proposed development on H10 through appropriate design policies set out within their neighbourhood plan. So the second part of the report is on budgets. Funding is available to groups developing neighbourhood plans through the government's neighbourhood planning support programme. Neighbourhood planning groups are able to claim a maximum of £28,000, as well as some technical support at no cost to the groups, depending on meeting certain criteria. Since the designation of the neighbourhood areas in the borough, requests have come forward from the neighbourhood areas for additional funding to support further evidence-based work. A figure of £50,000 has therefore been allocated by the council to help facilitate the preparation of these neighbourhood plans in the borough. Consequently, it has become necessary to give consideration to how the available funding can be allocated optimally. The council has therefore prepared a set of criteria applicable when considering the provision of additional funding to neighbourhood planning groups in order to ensure transparency and accountability. These are detailed within enclosure 2 of this report. All groups undertaking a neighbourhood development plan or order will be eligible to apply for up to £10,000 as a basic grant, taken from the £50,000 budget allocation. Groups facing more complex issues may be eligible for additional funding. This is a similar approach to central government support programme. The neighbourhood planning budget will be subject to periodic reviews as appropriate, and any funding requests will be determined on a case-by-case basis by the head of planning in consultation with the chairman of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bilo. Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pay compliment to Bowes Gifford Parish Council and their belief that in this neighbourhood plan and their drive on this Bowes Gifford North Fleet neighbourhood area to actually come up with this neighbourhood plan. They faced knockback after knockback by the previous version of the Basildon Borough Alliance. And it was only in 2018 that when myself and Councillor Mackenzie were elected in Pitsea South East that we were able to take up the challenge, and actually with our group and taking over administration, this actually became very much part of the local plan. And the work that they went on to do and the work they had done beforehand actually shows how local democracy can work with a local council, with an effective local council, with people who are extremely passionate about their area and the concept, which is of one village that they wish to create in Bowers Gifford. They're taking on that housing, but in effect, they want to do it in a way that retains the identity of Bowers Gifford and North Benfleet. And I think that is a credit to them. There's going to be hard questions to be asked and hard answers to be given, because like with anything, with any development project, some people are going to be upset about where development takes place. But the fact that it is now in the control and in the hands of the local people of Bowers Gifford is fantastic. I do wonder, in terms of funding, etc., whether there could actually be any thought given, because Bowers Gifford has already got an allocation of housing and some of these do not. And there are some particularly knotty issues there in terms of actually where there's been flooding, thinking about sites that are already located as well, and encompassing all of that, whether there could actually be consideration for them to get a higher level of funding than actually is being allocated so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. And while I disagree with your analysis of the situation, I also want to join your tribute to Bowers Gifford and the community for their work that they've put into developing their plans. And I'm particularly proud that we're bringing this this document and this report forward tonight that offers support to the community in developing their neighbourhood plans, and I think it's vital that we offer that support, and I'm particularly proud of that. In relation to the other points that you mentioned, I'll hand over to Mr. Bilo in relation to the criteria and support.
Yeah, I would just say that it's a very important neighbourhood plan for the district. It's important also because it provides such a large proportion of housing for the local plan. So I think that we would be quite supportive of any application that comes forward to deal with any specific issues, whether it's flooding or other issues, other technical issues within that area.
Thank you, Mr. Bilo. Any further comments from members? In which case we'll proceed. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, just a quick question. On the Hoefields neighbourhood area, the report says that neighbourhood forums expire after 5 years, and I noticed that 5 years is up for the Hoefields neighbourhood next month, or in May. So do we know what's happening with that?
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Mr. Bilo?
I don't, so I haven't heard anything more on that particular issue.
We can follow up with a response after this meeting, Councillor Moore. Thank you. We'll now proceed to the vote on the recommendations, which are set out on page 14. That committee notes the update on neighbourhood planning activities within the Basildon Borough and approves the recommendations that set the criteria for neighbourhood planning groups seeking to apply to Basildon Council for additional funding as set out in enclosure number 2. I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Fellows?
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Reid?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Turner?
I'll vote for it.
Councillor Moore?
In favour.
That is 6 in favour, unanimous. So we now proceed on to agenda item number 6, the London Resort Development Consent Order. And I believe, Mr. Davey, you're presenting this report.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I don't think there's really too much more to add on this item outside of the text that's actually in the report, given the distance between the borough and the resort itself. Just simply as a bit of background, several years ago, there was a proposal that was sort of put in motion really to develop a Disneyland style theme park based at Swanscombe in Kent. And this is what's now known as the London Resort. There's been various things over the years, various work done. The project was originally to be known as the London Paramount Entertainment Resort, as Paramount Pictures were on board with it initially, but they pulled out in 2017, I believe it was, and then in June 2019, London Resort gained the necessary licenses to have some of their rides based on Paramount Pictures films. Obviously, it's intended to be a major trip generator. There will be economic benefits for the area, and so overall, we believe that we should support the DCO on its planning merits. Just in case any members are not aware, the reason why we've actually brought this report is that as a consequence of some land around the port of Tilbury formally being included within the area to be covered by the development consent order, that's now effectively promoted Basildon to the status of a neighbouring borough for the purposes of the duty to cooperate. As we say, there are perhaps a few slightly grandiose claims in the supporting documentation. They're not necessarily issues on which the council must form a view on. There's perhaps a couple of questions over its overall long-term viability, given that Paramount has pulled out. But yes, the recommendation is simply that we are authorised to provide a generally supportive representation based on the planning merits that the proposal will bring.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask any questions? Councillor Rimmer.
Oh, congratulations, Farrell, I guess. I mean, they've become a free port. They could be getting a new Disneyland, well, or nearby. Well done to our neighbours.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. There are no other members that wish to speak on this item, so we'll proceed to vote on the recommendation that the committee agrees the response to the consultation should be submitted to the Planning Inspectorate, drawing on the content of this report. I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Fellows.
In favour.
Councillor Moore.
In favour.
Councillor Turner.
Or
Councillor Rimmer.
In favour.
Councillor Reid.
In favour.
Thank you. That is unanimous. We're agreeing on a lot tonight. We now proceed on to agenda item number 7, the revisions to the NPPF and the National Model Design Code consultation proposals, and also draw members' attention to the supplement that was sent round earlier this week to this agenda item. And I'll hand back over to Mr. Davey.
Thank you. And once again, unlike certain recent consultations, there's not really too much to say here. Overall, the changes which are proposed to this particular version of the NPPF are generally, they're quite small scale in comparison. They provide greater precision in the language used, and that will actually help decision makers and certainly reduce situations where that effectively schemes have been refused and had to go to appeal as a consequence of the actual drafting of the paragraphs themselves not being particularly clear. So this is all helpful. There are only 2 real issues where I think that the government will perhaps need a little bit further thought in respect of these proposed modifications. And the first one of those is paragraph 128, which would add further text around a call for design guides and codes to be based on effective community engagement and reflective of local aspirations for the development of their area. Some of that text is very clear. It's not very clear, actually. Start again. It reads very similarly to some of the text that was included within last year's Planning for the Future white paper. I think the government themselves actually thought that was very clearly expressed, but the problem is really that, that design and beauty are difficult to quantify because it's a very individual matter. and also they've still not really confirmed what would constitute engagement in that sense, and also what is then a representative sample of the community. You know, are we simply talking a numerical figure, as happens with things such as opinion polls, or would it be just members of the public? Would it be just particular resident associations? It's got to be drilled down a little bit further, because there will be a number of competing views put forward on issues such as design, and ultimately, what do you then include in a code? So some of the same points that were raised in observations to the white paper, I think, still remain very relevant. The revised text also continues to state that design guides and codes can be prepared at an area-wide or a site-specific scale, and to carry weight in decision making, they should be produced either as part of a plan or a supplementary planning document, although applicants may also elect to prepare codes for sites which they propose to develop. This doesn't make a great deal of sense, really. The government has placed a high importance on local authorities getting their own design code in place. It's clear they should be subject to consultation. So it certainly doesn't make a great deal of sense then for national policy to then allow applicants to circumvent a local design code and use their own designs. Again, there's a lot of competing work streams in local authorities per se. Planning departments have got limited financial and staffing resources. So effectively, I think that's something that really needs to be deleted, and applicants really should be either using the authority's own code or the national model one in that sense. It just doesn't make sense to allow someone to do as they please. Paragraph 130 sets, I think, a very nice aim, really, which would require that planning policies and decisions should ensure that new streets are tree lined, that opportunities are taken to incorporate trees elsewhere in development, such as community orchards, and that appropriate measures are in place to secure the long-term maintenance of trees, and that they're retained wherever possible. Now, again, where any large-scale new build developments are the subject of the planning application process, then it's likely that new roads are going to be created as long as they're built to the relevant county council standards. Trees could be included. Again, the maintenance, it wouldn't necessarily cost a developer a great deal to oversee their upkeep, but it's an obligation under Section 106. While we can't specifically ask for a contribution for maintenance, internally a certain portion of money could be ring-fenced to pay for that. But what that overlooks is that the majority of housing completions in the whole of South East England are flats as a percentage, and high housing targets, of course, are requiring developers and obviously local authorities to set policies requiring building to ever-increasing densities. So that actually limits the scope for new tree-lined roads in the first place. But then also including other aspects of government policy, thinking back to the consultations that have taken place over the last few months, as well as the expansion of permitted development rights. There seem to be a few tensions between this aim and other aspects of government policy, because Section 106 rules cannot, they simply do not apply to permitted development schemes. And of course, the permitted development rights are also then taking a significant number of proposals for residential uses outside the need for a full planning application. So, and under Section 106, we can secure contributions towards landscaping. So that, again, I think there's a little bit more thought needed there, really. And also opportunities being taken to incorporate trees elsewhere in development, such as community orchards, seems to overlook the fact that currently they fall within the third sector, and their funding tends to come from things such as the countryside stewardship grants, or again, matters that are relatively, I think, outside the government's control, such as the National Lottery Heritage Fund. They're not funded via the planning process. And if the government is intending to create a further link there, then I think some detailed guidance is needed on how this should be done, because overall there are maintenance implications from this, and the associated costs would then need to be borne by a council's capital budget. The consultation also talks a little bit about the National Model Design Code, and the points that have just been made really are equally applicable, that there's little detail in the code document itself on how you define community support for a proposal, how the community should be engaged or what's representative. Again, the expectation that authorities will prepare their own design code is clear, but again, there's that tension with the text in paragraph 128, which points out that applicants can elect to prepare codes for sites which they wish to develop. Also, then, as we said before, that failure to properly represent a broad cross-section of views may lead to some unintentional discriminatory impacts against particular groups, so including such as wheelchair designers who may require wheelchair users who may require a slightly different specification of internal or external design for their homes. And then there is one point. It's more of a very general comment really on this. One of the opening paragraphs of the NPPF proposes to include a reference to the United Nations Global Goals for Sustainable Development, which is obviously no issue in itself because the goals clearly reflect the social, economic and environmental angles of sustainable development. But it's not apparent why the government has never mentioned transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, before in the National Planning Policy document, because the 17 goals are underpinned by 169 targets. Most of them don't fall within the purview of land use planning in any case, but they've been enforced for over 5 years, and they've clearly been influencing government policy making since the 1st of January 2016. And again, will continue to guide the decisions that all of its member countries will take over the next 15 years. So it's clearly a document of some significance there. The government's also prepared an action plan for implementing the goals. As was mentioned, we did recently submit an addendum, if you like, on this point, and that's because we were, I say we as a planning policy team, we were contacted a couple of weeks ago, having written the report and put it through the necessary consultation process on the ModGov system. We were contacted by finance and asked to contribute to a corporate consultation on the new homes bonus. And that's proposing to revise the way in which the bonus is calculated and paid. But one of its suggestions was that payment should be linked to an unspecified percentage of an authority's housing delivery being achieved via the use of modern methods of construction. Again, by itself, we think it appears that the consultation perhaps doesn't quite realise the significance of what's being proposed in doing that, because at the moment there's certainly no link between the NHB funding system and the planning system, so these two have been conflated. But if greater use of MMC is to be made a condition, if you like, of receiving funding going forwards, this could actually risk outdating elements of the housing delivery and design and character policies in local plans, potentially anywhere across England, and of course any supplementary planning documents on those issues that don't mention the use of MMC. It's pertinent also because various court cases which have been looking at matters such as the tilted balance have confirmed a key legal point, which is that the degree of consistency with national policy is the main determining factor as to when and how planning policy is deemed to be out of date. So what is actually being asked for here is that there needs to be a policy in a local plan to reflect a potential new expectation that W%, which is the figure they use to justify a specific percent, of all new homes would need to be constructed using MMC for a local authority to receive its full new homes bonus amount going forward. Now, obviously in Basildon's case, we've got our examination hearings pending. We will be well placed to very easily propose a modification, if needed, to to amend our submitted policies to reflect this change if it's brought in. But obviously a number of authorities wouldn't have that option. So this change would actually require further amendments to the NPPF and the PPG in the first instance, and that would of course give councils time to internally adjust their own structures and make the necessary amendments to their own policy documents if and when needed. But crucially, it will also allow companies who are involved in the prefabricated construction industry or that manufacture materials such as hempcrete, which would fall within the scope, to obviously respond accordingly and gear up their own supply chains and production levels with the companies that supply them with the necessary materials. Obviously, what we don't want to see happen is that we've simply said that it shouldn't bring the matter of NHB monies into the scope of the planning system through a back door, and then simply looking to penalise councils when the desired percentage is not achieved. So it's actually very significant, and we don't think that's actually recognised in the consultation document itself. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. And before I invite members to come in, I'd just like to thank you for the work that you've undertaken in going through the consultation document and going through the guidance and preparing this report for us this evening, which points out some of the challenges. And I think it was a very detailed report going forward. So thank you. I'd like to invite members to come in on this item. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, just a question on the new homes bonus consultation. Which committee is actually responding to this? I mean, I thank the officer for highlighting questions 26 and 27, but what's happening to the whole consultation?
Yeah, so it's been overseen by the finance team. One of the technical specialists, I think he's responsible directly for housing matters, is leading on it. I'm not sure how the allocation of that has worked out, but we were contacted and asked to just to respond to that. What I suggest, with the chair's permission, is that I can certainly email him and follow up and find out what the reporting structures are, if that would help.
Mr. Davey, happy to ensure that happens. Councillor Moore, do you wish to come back?
No, I just, if you can let us know which committee is going to review the actual full consultation, because there's like 30 questions that need to be answered, and only a couple, I guess, probably affect this committee. So presumably the major part of it goes to the housing committee or something like that. But I would would appreciate if we could formally be told that.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Rimmer.
Yes, it's just clarifying things here as well. Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Just to clarify, really, I agree with everybody on the way you've gone through this consultation, picking up each of the points, and it's a very thorough job. But I think, obviously, by the nature of it, you've focused quite a bit on some of the pinch points for the council in terms of where we might have concerns, where we would just want to see those concerns mitigated. And I'm sure that the government, being the government, will listen, obviously, as it does, and adapt policy as it does. It's one of the best listening governments we've had in a long time. In terms of the actual policies, though, some of them, my understanding, and this is where I may need clarification, is that this is actually a great opportunity to have and to actually ensure that our communities have some uniformity of design, and but that's something that we should actually welcome, really, because it does really work, and it can make sure that some of the great things that are going on in terms of the local plan and looking at the sort of large developments that go in, there would actually be, they could be complementing each other, and people could understand and feel the character of parts of our borough based on that sort of design code.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. And before I invite Mr. David to come back in on, I agree with your sentiments. I hope the government do listen. There hasn't been a lot of that over the last 10 years, but I hope they do. And I'll invite Mr. David to come back on some of the detailed responses that you're asking for.
I think, yeah, that's again, that's all very, it's all very good, and we're not critiquing the concept of a design code at all. I think that the problem in respect of the text that's been proposed is that there's an expectation placed on authorities to get them in place and undertake that necessary consultation. But currently, as drafted, some developers would then be able to use their own codes if they wish to. So that would circumvent the whole process. And the only possible option there, it's not stated in the consultation, is that if the developers would actually then undertake a separate consultation with the public on the design of a scheme, then fine. Otherwise, you're effectively undermining the whole process, really. And it's that point that doesn't really make a great deal of sense, rather than the issue of a design code in itself.
Councillor Ramiro, I know you wanted to come back there, so I'll allow you to carry on.
Thank you. I mean, yes, I take your point that in terms of it could be the communities or it could be the developer designing the design code, and maybe there needs to be some greater clarity about how one gets that consent and how you move forward on that. But from what you've just said to me, and it's spun off in my head, one thing we have a real knotty problem with in planning are these back garden developments. And essentially, you've got a developer. I trust the developer more than the next generations of developers who come along, in the sense that, you know, they might have plotted it all out with these nice gardens and the parking all attuned to how many residents there will actually be. And then 20 years later, somebody comes along and starts thinking, actually, let's build a bungalow at the bottom of the garden and a little access road. And then everybody starts doing it. And then you start getting bad design. So could we at least reflect in our response that some of this is welcome, and actually, if it mitigates against that bad future design, where even if it's, you know, the developer's design code, but actually that would be a welcome thing.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. I think the report is quite balanced on the sections that we do welcome changes coming forward, but it also points out the challenges with some of the direction of travel. Mr. Davies, is there anything that you further want to add on to that?
No, Chair. I've got nothing more to say on that point.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. In the response to the consultation, are we actually mentioning the Essex Design Code that we try to follow and get developers to follow? We did approve, this committee, another time, did approve that the Basildon would support the Essex Design Code. Do you mention that in the response?
That's not been mentioned, so that would be a very helpful addition, which I can certainly do, because one thing that is less clear from that consultation and others which have taken place over the last few months is how a lot of the proposals would take account of the two-tier authority structure. It's simply not apparent at all.
Thank you, Councillor Moore, and I'll work with Mr. David to ensure that amendments are sought there. Any further members wishing to come in? Mrs. Lyons?
Yes. I think, Councillor Moore, you're quite right there, actually. That is we've endorsed that document, and that actually is quite a good example of how that is basically a code that you take what you want out of it. So actually it's probably, and that has gone through that is picked up by most local authorities in Essex. And the bonus of that, and that's where we have got there is a report and a piece of work due in the work programme, which we're still working on at the moment, and that is our own so the Essex Design Guide has within it nuances for the particular areas. So there's an Essex-wide code, and then there's nuances for each individual borough or district. And we're working on the nuances for Basildon, Wickford and Billericay at the moment, which it sort of goes to what they're sort of saying. So it won't be all houses in Billericay must be, black and white, and they must have, bricks and this, and they must have a pitch roof. It's basically looking at nuances of development. So I think that you're quite right, Councillor Moore. We think we need to make sure that we put that into our response, because we know that is successful as an endorsed document.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thanks.
And thank you, Councillor Moore, for your contribution there. We'll now proceed to the vote on the recommendation that committee approves the consultation response as set out in enclosure number 2 and the inclusion of the supplement to the report. I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Fellows. Sorry, Councillor Fellows, I didn't catch that there.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
In favour.
Councillor Moore.
In favour.
Councillor Turner.
Or
Councillor Rimmel.
Or
And that is 6 in favour. That is carried. And with that, that concludes our meeting this evening. Thank you all for your attendance and see you all soon.
cheers, bye.
Bye.